Hello, thanks for joining us. Today is September 19th, 2017, and this is Athens Speakout, episode number 415. I'm David DeWitt, Associate Editor of the Athens News, and I'm here today with Dr. Robert Whaley, a retired historian from Ohio University. And today we're going to talk about the first 9 months of the presidency of Donald Trump, as well as other political issues and current events happening today. So with that, I'll lead off by asking you, did you get a chance to see President Trump's speech to the United Nations today?
No. What did he say?
This was his first speech to the United Nations as president in New York. And he said a couple significant things that I caught. First, he spoke about putting America first. We've seen this language from him before. It was the same language that he used in his inauguration, where he said that the United States would put its people first and put America first and wouldn't go around the globe messing with other countries. But what was odd about that statement to me was that he followed it up by talking about North Korea, and he called, in his speech, he used a term that he has used on Twitter in the past week, calling Kim Jong-un Rocket Man. And he said, he basically said that the United States would destroy North Korea if Rocket Man continued to provoke him. So I thought that was interesting because it was kind of in conflict with what he said. First, he said the United States is not going to be have this activist, interventionalist foreign policy. Essentially, those aren't the terms he used. And then he essentially threatened total destruction of North Korea in the same speech, in the same breath. So it seemed like a contradiction to me. Either you're going to be active on the world stage and get involved in the affairs of other countries, or you're not. You know, you can't go around destroying countries and saying that you're not involved. So what, as far as your assessment of the North Korea situation and as far as Donald Trump's foreign policy so far, how does that compare historically to other presidencies?
There's no comparison. He is by far the most incompetent president the United States has ever elected. No, he has no experience in the State Department. He has no experience in military affairs. He has no experience in finance. He wouldn't know how to balance the budget. Now, he does have a degree in real estate law. Mm-hmm. He's a real estate dealer. But we've never had a real estate dealer. We've usually had lawyers to be the presidents, and we've sometimes had generals. General Eisenhower knew something about how the military works. The seventh president, Andrew Jackson, won the Battle of New Orleans, and as a result, he was elected the seventh president of the United States on his military record.
And General Grant, obviously.
And General Grant, right. But Jackson, by the way, after he won the Battle of New Orleans, got a degree in the law from the University of Tennessee. It was not a very good degree, but he knew something about the law. So the American Constitution was based on the British Constitution, and Britain had developed what they called the common law. And they developed a kind of progressive advanced law after the Protestant Reformation. And canon law, which was the law of the Catholic Church, was transformed by the Anglican Church, or the Church of England, when Henry VIII made his own appointment of who would be the Archbishop of Canterbury, and in defiance of the papacy. So Henry VIII was the founder of the Church of England, or the Anglican Church, in which the king appointed the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Right.
And then under Elizabeth, it became more and more Protestant. Henry VIII had married a Catholic, Mary of Aragon. And then he had her arrested, but not beheaded, because he went out with a lady in waiting called Anne Boleyn, who was a Protestant. But that didn't make any difference to Henry VIII. He didn't read any of this theology anyway.
Right. What he saw was the annulment of his first marriage.
Well, we see he had a superstition. He believed that children, whether they were male or female, was determined by God. So if God said, you get a female, there must have been some kind of a sin in Mary's background that she couldn't produce a son. So he said, okay, I'm going to try somebody else, Anne Boleyn, and she produced a daughter, Elizabeth. Well, she was illegitimate under the terms of the Catholic Church. And then he had Anne Boleyn beheaded for treason. Not for heresy, but treason.
Right.
Then he married another one, Jane Seymour. Well, she was a Protestant too. Well, she had a son, and he became Edward V. Edward V. Maybe it was Edward VI. I think it was Edward VI now when I think about it. Well, anyway, it was Edward VI, I think. But he only lived to be 15 years old, and he died. Well, I think some historians think, well, the real problem of Henry VIII was that he had syphilis and he didn't know it.
Accounting for his mental...
No, they were all weak. In other words, the boy was weak.
Oh, I see, his children.
Now, the women were strong. So, but they happened to produce females. But the boy died young. Then he married Mary of Aragon. Mary, she became Bloody Mary. Okay? But then she produced, well, first there was Catherine, Mary. She became Bloody Mary. She was legitimate. But she wanted to return the Church of England to the Catholic Church. And she became Bloody Mary because she went out and she executed all of the various Protestant ministers at Oxford and Cambridge for heresy. So they got rid of her because Protestantism was gaining at the grassroots, see? So anyway, he had Mary, he had Catherine, and then Mary, Bloody Mary. Then he had Anne Boleyn. Then he had Jane Seymour. He had them executed because they didn't produce a son.
Right.
Then he married 3 others who he didn't execute, but he divorced them. He had 6 wives, but 3 of them he executed. So Henry VIII had sex problems.
Yeah.
But he didn't know much about religion.
So. That's true. So
anyway, so what's the question?
So
How
I
did
guess,
we get into this anyway?
We were talking about the different types of leaders, and that Donald Trump has no experience beyond real estate. And so, do you think that he's and you talked about generals and the various experience that other presidents have had. Do you think that in that way Donald Trump is then reliant on Rex Tillerson?
Well, he has appointed a competent Secretary of State.
Okay.
Because Rex Tillerson had been the chairman of the oil companies. I guess it was Standard Oil of New Jersey. Exxon. There you go. And so he knows how to price the oil. And they can fiddle with Saudi Arabia in order to subsidize the Saudis. But from a military point of view, they want the Saudis to get airplanes and bomb Syria. So there's going to be, under that scenario, more wars in the Middle East. How do you get rid of ISIS? They're not going to send American troops. They're going to get the Saudis to bomb them with American plans.
Well, I don't think the Saudis are interested in defeating it. ISIS is Sunni, and Saudi Arabia is Sunni.
The Saudis are doing it just for the money.
And ISIS is largely funded by rich Saudi Arabians.
You got it. So there's a conflict in the Middle East between Saudi Arabia Iran,
So that's Sunni versus Shiite.
and Turks.
Right.
There are four possible powers. There are four big powers in the Middle East. Turkey, who don't speak Arabic. Egypt, which has the population. Saudi Arabia, which has the oil. And Iran, that has some oil, but speaks an Iranian language and not Arabic. And they are Shia Muslims and not Sunnis. They're not Orthodox. So there's a conflict within the Islamic religion between the Sunnis and the Shia.
And that goes back all the way
That
to the
goes back
death
to
of
centuries.
Muhammad. Yeah.
So the Middle East is in 6 and
700.
7s and 7s and 4s, and it's just going to be continual chaos. And I don't believe that the greater Middle East will ever unite against either Russia or the Western powers. Now, the Russians can get in there by playing politics in Syria.
As they do. They have an
they-
alliance with Iran. They
That's
have
right.
an alliance with the Assad regime.
Well, the United States is also
Syria.
allied to Iran. You've heard of the Six Treaty, the five powers of the
Oh.
the United Nations, plus Germany makes six.
Yeah, the Obama
Yeah.
treaty.
And
Yeah,
that
that was for nuclear oversight of Iran.
Yeah, but there are some Israelis in particular, and some American friends of Israel, who would like to see that treaty fail.
And Donald Trump came into office talking about
I don't think he knows anything
rolling
about
back
treaties.
that treaty.
Yeah, but he doesn't know anything
But
about
as
it.
far as I can tell, they haven't made any. This administration, Rex Tillerson or anybody else, Nikki Haley,
Haley.
they have not indicated that they're
That's
going to do anything with this treaty as far as
That's right.
rolling it back.
Yeah, that's going to stick. But it means continual war.
Perpetual war for
Yeah, because,
perpetual peace.
okay,
and
the
Gordon
Iranians
Dow's
have a terrorist
construction.
organization. The Iranians have a terrorist organization.
Mm-hmm.
The Saudis have a terrorist
You mean
organization.
Hezbollah?
Yeah, Hezbollah.
Yeah.
And the Hamas,
Mm-hmm.
okay? So all of these four great powers have terrorist organizations.
Right.
The Turks are getting more dictatorial, you know. They got rid of the republic.
Well, yeah, they absolutely are.
They have an Islamic president there now.
And they've got, and they've got an interest in suppressing and oppressing the Kurds as
Yeah,
well.
they don't
Because
like the Kurds.
The Kurds
You
want
got
to
it.
have their
and
own
they don't like the Syrians.
country.
They don't like the Syrians.
Right.
You see-
Well, because they want a secure southern border. That's their
right.
main interest.
Right, that's right.
And so having this Syrian civil war on their southern border and having the Kurds wanting to create an own independent state
Right.
of their own is instability that Turkey, especially under autocratic rule right now.
Now, my favorite appointee
suppress.
for the State Department is Bezovich. We've talked about him before.
We have, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember my theory of him? Andrew Bezovich.
Well, I remember you talking about him. I
Okay.
don't remember your
Well,
overarching
Andrew
theory.
Bezovich was a lieutenant colonel in the American Army, and he served through Vietnam, and he saw that the Vietnam War was a loser. So when George Bush 11, the last Bush, 43.
George W. Bush.
George W. Bush, when he said he was going to go to war, Bezovich resigned from the Army. Said, I will not serve in that war, you will lose it. And he went back and he got a PhD in history from Princeton. And then he got a job at Boston University teaching part-time history, saying why George W. Bush would fail. He could not win in Iraq. And sure enough,
Well, I
he
think it
didn't.
was true. I mean, I think you can say what you will about the advantages of removing the Hussein crime family from power and removing the Baathists from power, but as far as
Who's the successor?
yeah, who
We see that in
takes
Vietnam.
up
They
that
got rid of
vacuum.
No Zin Zin. Well, who followed No Zin Zin?
And that in the Middle East, we've seen over and over again that when you create a power vacuum, typically the only groups that are well organized enough to assume power at that point are religious zealots And
Zealots, you say zealots, I say zealots. There's another
either
one.
way, it's the same word. But,
Good.
but they always take up the power vacuum because they're the ones who are organized
Right.
and able to do so.
Right.
So even in Syria, we're seeing that with the United States policy, with the American-backed rebels
Right.
who are not zealots.
Right.
But then you have the ISIS and others who
Right.
who are religious zealots who want to take up the power vacuum that would be left
Well,
if Assad were removed from power.
unfortunately, in the Middle East, there are zealots, yes, religious zealots, but there are also people who are interested in the money, interested in oil.
Well, yeah, the natural
The
resources, of
Aramco
course.
oil company, they're not zealots. They're only zealots toward fellow Muslims. But they could deal with Aramco for the cash. So they had a two-faced policy, one toward the Americans and the other toward the rest of the Middle East world. So that's what Basevich says. Yeah, we should get rid of the terrorists, but it's not the American job. Basevich says it's up to the great powers, the Turks, the Egyptians, and the Iranians, to intervene and get rid of ISIS with their own land troops. Americans, no land. We'll give you aviation stuff. We'll send you
Air support, no ground troops.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
Now, what do you think of that policy?
I think that Basevich has a solution. I would vote for Basevich tomorrow.
Do you think that American air power too should be involved?
Well, the American air power,
I know it already is.
the American
But-
air power is not decisive. They have to have a land army. All wars in history are controlled ultimately by the infantry. The Air Force is just a sophisticated form of cannon. But the infantry has to occupy the so-called enemy if you're going to win. The United States the northern states had to invade the South and occupy Atlanta and New Orleans and say to the Confederate States of America, you are finished, you're defeated, you surrender. Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant. The war is over.
Appomattox, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the advantage of the South was that they didn't have any guerrilla army. Robert E. Lee was a gentleman, took out his sword, I surrender, the war is over. But there were some diehard Ku Klux Klan types who said, well, we'll go back into the swamps and we'll have a guerrilla terrorist war. Well, the Ku Klux Klan, I think, faded. Now, what is Trump doing about the Ku Klux Klan? Is he going to repudiate him or not?
Well, no. He's made it clear that...
I don't know if he's made it clear at all.
Well...
He said he repudiates the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
He says, I don't support that. But then he has a Twitter and says, yes, but there are two sides.
Right.
And both sides have a case. Well, what?
He's been consistently a both-siderist on that stuff.
Some people call him P.T. Barnum.
Yeah.
He was the manager of Circus.
I know, yeah.
Well, I think he's not P.T. Barnum. P.T. Barnum used to hire the clowns.
Sometimes I think Barnum was right.
No, but you see,
Sucker was born every minute.
Barnum hired the clowns, but this guy wants to be not only the manager, he wants to be the clown and get on the flying trapeze. So what does he do on Twitter? He appoints sessions and then he repudiates sessions. He appoints Comey, then he repudiates Comey. So he swims around, right? No one knows where he'll be on the next swing. Did you ever hear that song, The Daring Young Man on the Flying Trapeze?
Oh, yeah.
He flies through the air with the greatest of ease.
Yeah.
That was a song that was very popular when I was a kid. It's kind of died out. Did you ever hear it when you were a kid?
I've heard it, yeah.
Yeah,
I heard it when I was a kid as well.
Yeah.
So what does that mean when you have a president who won't take a firm stance, who
I think it's
flip-flops?
I think he'll either be impeached.
Goes
That's possibility.
back and forth.
That's possibility. And the other possibility is that the Republicans will lose big in the 2018 election. When more and more wake up, hey, our medical bills are getting higher and higher. They can't balance the budget. Okay? So
the midterms will be, I mean, obviously the midterms will be,
okay.
A judgment on the Trump presidency's first 2 years.
That's one possibility. Now I have something positive to say about Trump.
Okay.
I wrote up a little petition. This is what it says. I agree with Donald Trump's decision to spend taxes for the relief of the state of Texas as the first priority. Part 2, I suggest drafting a petition to be signed by the undersigned people. It is called the Petition on Global Warming. And then the petition says, we, the undersigned, should be endorsing, we, the undersigned, should be endorsed by the following people. 1, the Secretary General of the United Nations. 2, 100 senators from both parties. 3, the 50 governors from both parties. 4 representatives from the House of Representatives, signed by 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. It is up to the Trump administration and all Democratic and Republican leaders to stand up and be counted. The American voters can see who has the courage to sign and who refuses to sign. And the petition is called the Petition on Global Warming. The new head of the Petition of Global Warming should read, do you believe with Donald Trump that in light of Hurricanes Harvey in Texas and Irma in Florida, that global warming is a hoax? Yes or no?
I think...
Stand up and be counted. I don't believe it's a hoax.
Well, neither do I.
We got to get important people with power to sign that.
Yeah.
And then some of these clowns out in Mays County will wake up.
Do you think that, don't you think that will just break along party lines the way that issue has so far anyway?
There are some Republicans who are beginning to jump off the bandwagon of Trump.
Yeah.
One of them is Rand Paul from Kentucky.
Yeah, but he was never a big Trump guy anyway. He's always been the libertarian streak.
And I noticed that Mitch McConnell from Kentucky didn't like Trump on this flip on the children, the
dreamers.
The dreamers. Yeah. He said, why are you backing off? Stick to your guns. Build the wall. So he seems to be wavering for votes.
Well, yeah, and I think
that's one of his flips on the trapeze.
And Mitch McConnell is a political tactician, parliamentary tactician in the United States Senate, and so I think his frustration with Trump is that
he's worried about 218. How many elections? How many senators?
Well, he's worried about losing control over his chamber, and he's also worried about not having a president who's reliable.
That's right.
He's not reliable in his position. He's not reliable in his support. He's not reliable in his positions on policy or his support politically of his theoretically allied Republicans.
What about Sessions, his favorite senator from Alabama? Appoints him attorney general.
Yeah, one of his earliest
he's an idiot.
supporters.
I don't like him.
He calls him an idiot to his face in the Oval Office and embarrasses him and dresses him down. I think obviously these are the things that you get when you have a kind of capricious leadership acting on whim and instinct more than well thought out strategy.
Well, I'd like to introduce some new information, and I'm going to introduce the Progressive magazine. And this magazine competes with The Nation, and some people don't know the difference between the Progressive and the Liberal, but they are somewhat similar and somewhat different. Anyway, Progressive is published in Madison, Wisconsin, and started out in about 1910, 1920 with the Progressive movement. and Nation is published in New York, and they are the voice of liberalism. And
the Nation has a long, storied history of progressivism. They were founded 1865,
well,
just
yeah,
after
yeah,
the Civil
but they
War.
are liberal.
Right.
And the
liberal.
progressive was a slightly different. See, the progressive believes in progress. The
Right.
liberty believes in liberty. Well, in the American Constitution, under Franklin Roosevelt, he was both a progressive and a liberal. Abraham Lincoln was both a progressive and a liberal. So these are the manipulation
Yeah,
of
they're
words.
not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, right.
Certainly, most of the time, progressives and liberals are allied. You can make a distinction between them.
Okay. Well,
As you have.
the second article in this progressive magazine is over here on page 14, and this is a very interesting article. It's written by Bill Lubers, and it's called "Trump and Russia. Nothing to see here?" Question mark. And then he's got a spider. The spider is, the head of the spider is Donald Trump himself. And the spider goes in all of these directions. And I'm going to read some of these people on the spider. The second spider is called Rex Tillerson, Trump's Secretary of State. And I think we've already said he's somewhat competent. Do you want to say anything more about him?
Oh, I think that he's competent. I don't think that he's necessarily good for the country.
Right. Well, he's
That's
still...
I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. Well, he could defect, but according to this magazine, he was still in Trump's web.
I think that he's doing the interests of the same interests that he's always represented
Right.
throughout his career. That's the interests
Okay.
of fossil fuel and,
Right.
and
Okay.
big oil and
All
natural
right.
gas.
So the third picture here, the third man on the spider is Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, which we've more or less examined. Now, the fourth one might be somebody new, called Paul Manafort. He was Trump's former campaign manager who received $12 million in undisclosed cash payments for the Ukraine pro-Russian party and registered as a lobbyist. Reportedly, he paid $10 million a year. He was paid $10 million a year by the Trump oligarchs to push Putin's policy. Okay.
And Manafort, the news just broke this week that Manafort was told by the FBI, by Special Counsel Robert Mueller, that he very well might face indictment. Manafort's going to be at the center of what happens with the Russian collusion
Right.
investigation and Robert Mueller.
Right.
Manafort's got all the lobbying ties to Russia. He was wiretapped.
Right.
Before and after the campaign. He was told by Special Counsel Robert Mueller that he would likely face indictment. Donald Trump himself may have been caught up in the wiretaps, and he really is the linchpin to a lot of the Trump family's Russian connections as far as the 2016 election goes.
Okay. Well, the fifth personality on this web is Michael Flynn. You want to say anything about him?
He lied about
Well, he was first of all, he was the former
He was a national security advisor
that was his
who
title.
lied about his contacts with
Right.
the Russians
Right,
and was forced to resign once his lies were revealed,
right, right,
just very early in the Trump presidency.
right. Well, he's another flip of the halfway point. Well,
All
let's
right.
introduce ourselves.
Well, this is Athens Speakout, and I am David DeWitt, Associate Editor with the Athens News. I'm here with Dr. Robert Whaley of Ohio University, retired professor of history.
That's right.
And we are currently discussing the
Second part
Trump-Russian
the second
scandal.
part of the Trump presidency.
Yes. The
Part two.
The web of Russian collusion
Right.
from the
Possible
Progressive
conclusion.
magazine.
It still has to be proven in a court of law
Right.
or by an impeachment process. So it's pending.
So we just covered Paul Manafort and Mike Flynn.
Right, okay. Well, the next one is, let's see, this is number 5. Number 6. Number 5 was Flynn. Number 6 is Ivanka Trump. Who is she?
Ivanka Trump is Donald Trump's daughter, who he's promoted to some sort of ill-defined senior advisor position in his White House, although it's not like an official position, though she seems to sit in his stead in a lot of meetings.
But wasn't she born in Croatia? She's a recent immigrant. She wasn't
his daughter?
Yeah, he wasn't. She
I don't know where Ivanka was born. I assume that she was born in New York. I don't know for sure.
I think he's had 3 marriages. I think she's a young new wife.
You're thinking of
No, that's Melania. Ivanka is his daughter. Melania is his wife.
Okay, so I got him twisted up by him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ivanka is from New York, yeah.
Well, she was born in New York.
She was born in New York City. Yep.
Good. Okay. Well, she's legitimate then. Somewhat legitimate, depending on whether you're a Catholic or a Protestant.
I'm neither, so.
Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry about that. I missed the ball there.
That's all right.
And then we have number 7.
Significantly, though, I guess I should mention while we're on the subject of Ivanka, she's married to Jared Kushner,
Oh, that's the 7th.
who's coming up next.
Yeah. Now, Jared Kushner is the son-in-law. Now, he is Jewish.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
And he comes from a real estate family himself.
Yeah, but then
his
he can
father
say, then Trump can say,
sent
well,
to prison.
I'm not anti-Semitic. I have a Jewish relative, you see. That's how he flip on this trapeze. Is he really an anti-Semite?
Yeah, but
or
that's,
isn't he?
I mean, yeah, but that's a rather lame argument. That's like saying I can't be racist because I have a black friend. It doesn't really hold any water.
Okay, well,
It's
you
just
can believe him or not
something
believe
people
him. Okay, then there are 5 other personalities that I don't know anything about. I call them the lesser figures. Maybe you can tell us something about them. Carter Page, you know anything about that?
Carter Page, no, not particularly.
Well, I won't say anything because I don't know anything about him. All right, how about Roger Stone?
I know Roger Stone personally, actually.
You met him?
Yeah, several times.
Well, tell us about him.
I can't use the language on TV that I would prefer to use.
Well, just use it
Roger Stone.
and just talk about
Roger-
baloney. Just talk about baloney.
Roger Stone started. Well, there's a very
He's full of
specific.
baloney.
There's a very specific political term to describe what Roger Stone does. Roger Stone describes himself as an agent provocateur. What he really is a political goon, a henchman. He started off as a political henchman for Richard Nixon.
Okay.
And basically what he does is he goes out and finds devious ways to corrupt the political process and to attack political opponents. And so there's actually a whole documentary on Netflix about Roger Stone right now that I would suggest viewers watch, kind of a Sun Tzu, known thy enemy type of thing. So what Roger Stone has been trying to elect Donald Trump president for several decades now. He is a political henchman on the right wing, although he personally kind of floats along the libertarian line a little bit. And he was a campaign advisor to Donald Trump. He was a partner in business with Paul Manafort. He is a host of right-wing podcasts and other media, the Stone Cold Truth, where he basically does advocacy for the Trump administration and the Trump brand. And I can tell you a story, one of my favorite Roger Stone stories. And this is kind of a funny story, but I'm not trying to indicate that Roger Stone is in any way a good guy. He is not a good guy.
Where did you meet him, by the way?
I met him in Dallas on the 50th anniversary of the JFK assassination.
Wow.
I went to Dallas with a friend of mine who is...
On your own time, not paid by
yeah,
the
although
news.
I did write it up for the paper, but it was... a friend of mine has done some work with Roger Stone doing like video editing stuff, and so he knows Roger Stone. We went to Dallas. I met Roger Stone in Dealey Plaza.
Wow.
We did.
What a place. Tell us
him.
the importance of Dealey Plaza.
Well, Dealey Plaza.
We have a lot of young people here.
Where where the motorcade was driving through when
Yeah.
JFK was assassinated.
Right.
So we ended up having dinner that night with Roger Stone, actually, and that's where I really got to talk to him. It was kind of funny. I had a black eye at the time. He was wearing a bulletproof vest. It was a weird little situation. But here's a taste of what Roger Stone does. There was a Republican primary in, I believe it was New Hampshire, maybe New Jersey, back in the 80s.
Sounds like New Hampshire. That's the key primary.
Yeah.
New Jersey comes later.
This wasn't presidential. This was for governor.
Oh, for governor.
And
Local.
Stone's candidate, I think it was during the Reagan presidency, and Stone's candidate was in a primary against another Republican, and Reagan was coming to the state to visit. And so the Reagan people were like, oh, we can't pick one candidate or the other. We'll have both Republicans meet with the president. We'll get a photo op with all three. So this is what Roger Stone does. He calls the Secret Service anonymously and gives them a perfect physical description of the opponent and says that this guy is going to try to make his way onto the tarmac to meet the president and do him physical harm. And so he warns the Secret Service that this opponent is going to try to hurt the president. And so the president comes, Stone's candidate gets out there, gets to be with the president. The other candidate tries to go out there. The Secret Service stops him, hauls him away for questioning. He doesn't get in the photo op, so the photo op is just Stone's guy and the president, and this other guy gets hemmed up by the Secret Service. Another thing that he did, he'll do stuff like there was one Republican primary where, who is it? I'm going to blank on the name here. There's a rich family that was in another primary, and Stone's guy wasn't part of the rich family, so what Stone did was park a Rolls Royce outside of the debate convention center with bumper stickers with the other family's name all over this car.
This is Nixon's dirty tricks extended.
He's a dirty trickster. That's what he does. And he's been doing it for 40 years, and he's a big Trump guy.
Right.
And he pulled off.
By chance, David, is he relation to Oliver Stone? Or?
Not that I know of.
Sounds like he could be.
Yeah.
Well, you were looking for a word. You know, the French had a word. It's called agent provocateur, which means in English the provocative agent.
That's what he calls himself. Yeah. There's another term for it that has to do with rats copulating that is typically used in politics, but I'll have to leave that at that because I can't use the actual
They used to call a rat fink. Is that a rat fink?
Close enough.
That isn't too dirty because most people don't know what a fink is.
Yeah, okay. So that's who Roger Stone is.
The rat fink was some kind of a guy who would betray you.
Wasn't there a character in history named Mike Fink that was a really nasty guy?
Yeah.
That's where that came from.
Well, I used to say when I was a kid, a rat fink is somebody who would squeal on you.
Yeah.
Somebody who would
It's close to
turn
that.
you into your mother or something.
Yeah.
Well,
So
anyway.
that's all I got
Now,
on Roger Stone.
Officially, what this said here was that he has foreknowledge of WikiLeaks. He's into
Stone
that.
did, yeah. Well, he publicized that.
Yeah.
He said, oh, this stuff's going to come out from WikiLeaks, and he would predict
And he has
it, and then it would
contact
drop.
with the Russian military.
That does not surprise me at all. He's a really bad guy.
Right. Well, I guess he's the baddest of
He's
the bad.
one of the worst people I've ever met in my life.
All right.
to
Well,
tell you the
the next personality on here is Michael Cohen. Do you know anything about him?
No, I don't
All right.
think so.
Well, I'll read you the excerpt here with my glasses. He's Trump's personal lawyer, whose wife is a Ukrainian. That's this Ukrainian thing here. And has asked the congressional investigators about the contacts with the Russian government and about his contacts with provide information about challenging Trump and he gets no satisfaction.
Robert, I think Mr. Cohen is a member of the big Jewish law firm there in Manhattan.
Related to Roy Cohn.
Is he?
Yeah, they didn't bring that out. You know who Roy Cohn is?
I do. Roy Cohn is another awful, terrible person.
Yeah.
One of, actually, a mentor not only to Donald Trump, but to Roger Stone as well.
Yeah.
And that's all covered in that documentary about Roger Stone on Netflix. But Roy Cohn was a longtime New York attorney
Right.
who taught Donald Trump a lot of his tactics about
Cheating.
never be on defense, attack.
Yeah, and cheat the working class. Cheats the
lie,
plumbers.
steal,
Yeah.
hurt, maim, don't care about anyone but yourself, that
Right.
type of cutthroat philosophy. Yeah. Roy
Okay.
Cohn, he was, yeah.
Okay, is there anybody else? No, there's one more, I think. Mark Kasovich. You know anything about Mark Kasovich?
I don't.
Well, he's another one of Trump's long-term private attorneys, tapped to represent him in Russian influence probe. Also,
Robert, I think they're members of the same law firm.
yeah,
They're in Manhattan.
right. Represents the Russian bank in ongoing federal lawsuit run by Oleg Despotspia, Russian, Kremlin-affiliated Russian oligarch. He's in bed with Victor Putin.
Vladimir?
This Kasovich is probably buying hotels into Miami for the Russians. I don't know. That's a scandal. They got a lot of evidence if they can only get it into the court. I guess that's the end of the spider web.
There is an awful lot of circumstantial evidence.
Well, yes, circumstantial evidence.
Just as far as these business interests aligned with these business interests, these meetings happening with these people, the interconnectedness of everything to do with Trump, all his campaign people, the Russians, their financial interests in the Ukraine and Russia. Circumstantially, there's a mountain of evidence. What we don't know, what if we have right now, is where the smoking guns are and whose hands, whose fingerprints are on them, right? And whether Trump's fingerprints are, like, I'm speaking metaphorically, but whether his fingerprints are actually on any of the smoking guns. And we're just going to have to wait and see. I think that Mueller is going to do a good job. He's a very thorough prosecutor and investigator. And these types of cases this big take a lot of time. Small cases in Athens County alone take a lot of time. This is a huge international federal investigation. And it might be, another year before we really know what's going to happen with any of that.
Right.
So we're going to all have to practice some patience. We can speculate as far as these circumstantial things go, but Mueller's going to play it pretty close to the chest, until he has actually indictments to bring down.
Well, I have one more picture here about the Progressive magazine. It's written by the editor of the magazine, Ruth Conniff, and it's called Contempt for Democracy. And they republish an old cartoon showing the Statue of Liberty. She has the U.S. Constitution under her arm. And then they're talking about just what tactics you're talking about. Little smoke bombs called legislative delaying tactics. Another smoke bomb, assault on the court decisions. Another smoke bomb, demagoguery. And they're splashing all over the nice dress of Lady Statue of Liberty. That's an example of corruption. And this cartoon was originally published in 1959. Who was president then?
Eisenhower.
Yeah, the very end
At
of
the
the
end
Eisenhower.
of the Eisenhower campaign.
Yep.
Okay. Well,
The very end of Eisenhower.
Right.
Well, and as a historian, oh, look, Fighting Bob. La Follette. Wait, how do you say it?
Follett. Bob Follett.
Bob La Follette. Fighting Bob La Follette.
Right.
I think that as a historian, do you see history as cyclical, or at least do you see it maybe not cyclical, but very often repeating itself in echoes of stuff that's gone before?
Well, it's not a true cycle.
Right.
It's a spring-like thing. The spring has a certain climb. That's called progress. And then the spring also has decay. So there are certain analogies that come around. So that the French Revolution, 1789, looks like the Russian Revolution of 1917, okay? And we can talk about the balance of power in war. 1914 looks like a repeat of the 1939 World War II. So there are certain similarities. But the cycle is either, the spring is either going up or down. So that in World War I, it's going down. You have World War I, and then World War II is worse because it's more violent. And there was a temporary revival in Europe with the European Common Market. And now it seems to be going down again with the division between England and the United States and Germany. Germany is the largest economic power that could challenge the European Union, could challenge
sure.
the United States over the national debt question. The euro might be more solvent than the dollar. What is the future of the dollar? It's all fiat money.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's not like it's based on anything like the gold standard.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, sometimes I get surprised when people say things like, when people get shocked at intolerance or racism or sexism or something like that, and they say, it's 2017, as though 2017 indicates that somehow magically the human race is so advanced that these things can't be expected anymore.
Well, these are 18-year-olds.
I wanted to get your opinion on that, because it seems to me a lot of these things are cyclical as well. You know, like modes of intolerance and stuff. And so just by the fact of it being...
Intolerance has been steady.
Yeah.
That's been throughout history.
Right.
Back in 600 A.D., the Arabs were fighting the Christians. Christians were in a holy war against the Arabs. So the Islamic faith and the Christian faith have always been intolerant toward the other. Muhammad. There's one God, his name is Allah, and I, Muhammad, am his prophet. And if you want to join the Islamic religion, you become an Islam. Islam means I submit. That's why they bow down 5 times a day. I submit to the will of Allah. And then they always sign off, God willing. They don't say goodbye. I'll see you again, God willing. This is fatalism. It's all determined by God. It's all written. It has been written. Did you ever see Lawrence of Arabia?
Yes.
It has been written. And Lawrence says, no, it hasn't been written.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the interesting problem of intolerance. So intolerance has, it changes its tune. Society, the American society, used to be intolerant about religion. And they've always been intolerant of blacks. We have a racial problem which goes back to 1607. There was some reform with the Civil War. There was some Reconstruction. Then it relaxed. It returned back to the good old days.
Right.
And now they're arguing about the statues of Robert E. Lee and the Confederate flag. I think that's a little nonsense. You can't rewrite history by changing the name of anything.
Right. Yeah. No. My view on that is when I hear people say, "Oh, you can't erase history by tearing down a statue." Well, we don't learn our history from statues.
That's right.
We learn our history from universities and schools and books and libraries.
Well, the statues are good for children.
Yeah. Statues, to me, represent something that we want to memorialize, something that we want to remember about ourselves.
When I was a kid,
and honor.
When I was a kid, there were 2 holidays. We had time off. Washington's birthday, 22nd of February. Lincoln's birthday, the 12th of February. Well, Nixon, in his propaganda, said, well, let's get rid of those holidays and call it President's Day.
Right.
So all presidents
let's put it on a Monday so there's a long weekend so businesses can make a lot of money.
Let's have fun. It's all a celebration.
Yeah.
And one president is as good as another, just like one king is as good as another. That's a kind of a hint of let's be a monarchy.
Maybe Nixon just had the foresight to realize there would never be a Nixon's birthday holiday.
Well, he didn't think he'd be impeached.
Yeah.
He thought he was going to be reelected in '72.
Right. Well, he was, but yeah.
But he didn't serve his next 4 years.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Henry Kissinger undermined him. So there's nothing sure in a horse race.
Right.
And there's nothing predictable about the next election. That's why I don't have much confidence in polls. The polls will always change.
And the polls failed us drastically in 2016.
Right.
So that's why even though in 2018 the polls are looking okay right now, I don't think it's anything that we can rely on.
Right.
So I think we've only got a couple minutes left here, I believe. About 2 minutes left here.
Only 2 minutes? Yes, okay.
Yeah,
well,
only about that. So is there anything else that you'd like to add to our discussion today?
Well, in the next 2 minutes, I would like to appreciate an article. I'd like to give a good word for Paul Krugman, September 15th, 27. He puts in an article about Bernie Sanders. And he says that there were 17 Senate Democrats who are supporting Bernie Sanders on Medicare. And this might be the wave of the future for a bipartisan election in which Sanders may pick up some former Trump voters who see that their medical bills can't be paid for. So that's another sign of hope. Anyway, thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, Professor. Good
we
to
have
see
to
you.
keep the debate going.
Because, as you say, debate is the oxygen of democracy.
So we have another one?
We'll have another one.
Well, let's have the new title, though.
Yeah.
You see, I think that
Thank you.
You and I have